So when you're here next week, you must absolutely sit in the exact same seat. Okay? It's an inside joke. Everyone seems to have chosen that they're sitting in a place they normally never sit, in the hope that they were going to mess with my head. I was messed up before I came here. So Lord, with your eyes you have searched me, while smiling you've spoken my name. Now my boat's left on the shore lying behind me. By your side I will seek other seas. Let me tell you a true story. And I share this with you. I will change the names of the people just in the off chance that any of you might have first of all, seen the story, and secondly, might even know the individuals. When I was a very young priest and I was up in Dutchess County, because I was the youngest clergy, I automatically got assigned to working on the Interfaith Council, because that's what you do to the young priests, okay? You just stick them on all the councils and the committees and nobody else wants to be on. And I got to meet some very, very interesting people. One of them was a doctor who, now remember, I'm in my mid to late 20s. So this guy, as far as I was concerned, was this old guy. He was got to be 40, 41 years old, you know. Lay person who was representing one of the local evangelical churches. And he came to a meeting. We struck up a friendship. He came in, and one of the last meetings, when he was resigning from the commission, his term was over, and he said, by the way, I want to let you know what I've been planning on doing. And I'll give you the timing on this a little bit later, but a man who obviously, out of med school, his wife worked really hard to put him through med school. They had one kid in college and two heading that way, okay? And he went home and he told his wife he really, in his heart of hearts, believed God was calling him to be a medical missionary and go to Bosnia. Remember the 90s? Okay? Bosnia. 1,000 years of ethnic and religious hatred, of people who hated us as much as they hated each other. And he wanted to go there as an American, as an evangelical, and as a doctor to bring healing to people. So he brings this message home to his wife and says, guess what? You're going back to work because I've got to go back to seminary for 6 more months to get whatever certification or training that would have been necessary. And the kids are not going to graduate from their high schools because they're going to come with us into a war zone, excuse me. And his wife, as I told you, was going back to work to once again put him through school. And then he calls up his brother and sister-in-law and tells them that they're aging parents. Well, guess what? You're going to have to take care of mom because I'm going over to Europe. And then he turned to me and said, and no one was happy. I think we tend, in reading the scriptures, to forget the real persons behind what we are asked to reflect on. Those that Jesus called to ministry and to follow him, really entering into second careers, whether they knew it or not. And they all had families, they had work, careers, they had bills to pay, they had aging parents. And I know, there's someone, fortunately not sitting in front of me, but every time I use an example out of time, they don't think it's funny, they think I actually literally believe this. Okay, this is just pretend, okay? Mrs. Peter gets a phone call, okay? I don't believe Mrs. Peter gets phone calls, but just so that you know. Mrs. Peter gets a phone call and she gets told by the guys at the dock, you know, the boss hasn't shown up for work again today. He's running around with the scruffy carpenter's son, who thinks he's a preacher man. And Mrs. Peter, who married a very successful business person, we know it was relatively successful. There was a partnership. It was a consortium of some sort. At least a couple of boats were involved in it, just from the description Luke gives us, who's now about to go from business person, fisherman, to student, to wandering disciple, to preacher, ultimately to martyr. Although he doesn't know that yet. And by the by, Mrs. Peter gets to stay home and take care of his sick mother. If people ever get the belief in their hearts that Jesus is calling them to do something, be very careful. You will get what you ask for and then more. One might say, if you understand that you're being called to ministry, get out of here now before you accept the invitation. Why become vulnerable to something that will so wonderfully and dangerously change your life? And of course, the point is we're all called to this. We are told that God has known us, has loved us, has forgiven us from all eternity, and he calls us to this awesome experience. 3 calls today you listen to, all right? You listen to the first reading. Isaiah was a priest. He's alone in the temple. And all of a sudden, he is overwhelmed by this religious experience. He experiences the presence of God in a way he cannot explain. What does he do? He simply says what's on his mind in a moment of absolute honesty. I'm not worthy of this. I am a man of unclean lips living among a people of unclean lips. I am a sinner. I am nothing. Whatever you want, God, you don't want me. In the second reading, when Paul writes to this problem child of his, the Christian community of Corinth, one that he founded, with all of their problems, and he tells a little bit about himself. He gives us that inkling into his soul, just a moment. And he said, you know, the risen Christ, I handed on to you what I was told, that Christ appeared to all the important people. And then last of all, for reasons I can't explain, he appeared to me, the least important of all. And Peter is overwhelmed by this ordinary catch of fish. And again, put yourself in his shoes. Go into your professional, put on your professional hats for a moment, okay? You are a professional at what you do. And somebody comes and tells you how to do your job better. I love when people do that to me, okay? But that's what happens, okay? He's told, get in the boat and go fish over there. And I'm sure Peter's instinct was, yeah. All of a sudden I realized I can't use the language in church. All right, but I'm sure the reaction is that kind of a reaction. And then whatever happens so overwhelms him, he becomes aware of himself as who he is, as flawed and vulnerable and imperfect and everything else. And he says, why do you want me? And the point is, God does call you. He calls every one of us by name for service, for love, for ministry. From all eternity, somebody named Zach or Logan or Victoria or Aiden. I'm not going to say Aiden's mom. Amy, because you're more than just, as I was reminded today, I am more than just my mother or father of my children. Point is, God knows you by name and calls you by name. And every one of us have been called to ministry. Every one of us have been called to love one another, to serve one another, to bring Christ into our world, and to be Christ for the other members of our world, whoever crosses your path. In the end, like Peter, we're all called to be fishermen, aren't we? Bring Christ to others. Duke, and that's what God has intended for you. God knew from all eternity that you'd be in that pizzeria when I walked in the other day, eating what you were eating. I hope that was not in preparation for a game. Good, because I would not have wanted to be your stomach if that were. We've all been empowered by the Spirit. We've been given eyes to see and ears to hear and hands to serve and hearts to love. Called by name from all eternity. No matter how flawed you are, no matter how imperfect you are, no matter how unprepared you think you are empowered to be that disciple. To make every effort when common sense says, why bother? And to make every attempt when everyone around you thinks you're a fool. This is about reacting to the awesome, humbling, joyful experience of being called. To leave the boat you know at the seashore and to sail other seas. To be where Christ wants you to be in the lives of those where he puts you. Will it always make you happy? Probably not. Will you always be doing the Lord's work? Yeah. So they left their nets and their ship and their partners, and they followed him. And the Lord invites each of us to do the same thing. Amen.
Amen. Amen.